Hi, this is Dr. George Pereira. Welcome to the course Listening and Speaking in ESL. Today we are going to another topic actually 5, speaking and its basic considerations. So what are the elements of speaking? Identify and describe the elements in the communication context. So these are two questions you try to answer. What are the elements of speaking? So we are going to go into detail now. So what are the elements of speaking? Elements of speaking and necessary for speaking are connected speech. First one. So what is connected speech? Effective speakers of English need to be able to not only to produce the individual phonemes of English but also to use fluent connected speech. So saying I would have gone and I would have gone, in connected speech sounds are modified, omitted, added or weakened. So in speech, that's how it takes place. Sounds are modified, omitted, added, weakened. So I gonna go is a language that develops, I think, with connected speech. Expressive devices is the second one. Expressive devices. Native speakers of English change the pitch and stress of particular parts of utterances, vary volume and speed, and show by other physical and non-verbal, that means paralinguistic means, how they are feeling, especially in face-to-face interactions. The use of these devices contributes to the ability to convey meanings. They allow the extra expression of emotion and intensity. So these are the elements of speaking: connected speech, expressive devices. Then lexis and grammar. Spontaneous speech is marked by the use of a number of common lexical phrases, especially in the performance of certain language functions, such as agreeing or disagreeing, expressing surprise, shock or approval, where students are involved in specific speaking contexts, such as a job interview. We can prime them in the same way with certain used phrases which they can produce at various stages of the interaction. Then negotiating language. Effective speaking benefits from the negotiating language we use to seek clarification. We often need to ask for clarification when we are listening to someone else. Speakers also need to structure their discourse if they want to be understood, especially in more writing like speech such as oral presentations. We will look at this greater detail later. Mental and social processing. This another element. Effective speakers need to be able to process language in their own heads and put it into coherent order so that it comes out in forms that are not only comprehensible but also convey the meanings that are intended. Language processing involves the retrieval of words and phrases from memory and their assembly into syntactically and propositionally appropriate sequences. So, speaking activities in language lessons help students develop habits of rapid language processing in English. Then the other one is interacting with others. Most speaking situations involve interactions with one or more participants. This means that effective speaking also involves a good deal of listening and understanding of how other participants are feeling. So, knowledge of how linguistically to take turns and allow others to do so. On the spot information processing is another element. You may have to discuss about two elements for your exam. So just write your notes for these elements. On the spot information processing. Quite apart from our response to others' feelings, we also need to be able to process the information they tell us the moment we get it. The longer it takes for the penny to drop, the less effective we are as instant communicators. But it should be remembered that response is very culture specific. Response is very culture specific and is not prized by speakers in many language communities of the world. The response, Sri Lankan culture and the Western culture are two different. Then we are going into another element that is very important. We have also discussed earlier in some of the topics, the communication context. Let us take a step back and consider the context of oral communication and the elements within it. This is because oral communication must always occur within a context. So the same is true of speaking, as oral communication must necessarily involve a speaker who speaks and a listener. So encoding and decoding. Context and channels. That is another important area. The context and the channels. Just look at this diagram, the figure. Effect, source receiver, competence. Source receiver, competence, effect. So sender and the receiver. Messenger, feed forward. But then the channels can be disturbed by noise. Source and receiver. So the source receiver, source and the receiver. Source and the receiver, sender and the receiver. Each person will formulate and send messages and also perceives the comprehends messages, receiver, the source functions and the receiver. But both functions are performed by a single participant. Single participant becomes the source as well as the receiver in the communication. Listening and speaking, speaking and listening. Encoding and decoding. Encoding refers to the act of producing messages, either in speaking or writing. Speakers and writers are known as encoders, and listeners and readers as decoders. They decode the message. Then encoding, decoding process. There's a process. So this one is encoding, this is decoding the message. Then we are going to another area, competence. This is the knowledge of the language and knowledge of the world used to compose and interpret messages. So that is the competence. You gain communicative competence by observing others, by explicit instruction, by trial and error, and so forth. Keep in mind that to a certain extent, competence is specific to a given culture. The principles of effective communication vary from culture to culture. What proves effective in one culture may prove to be terrible in another culture. See these two conversations. Your dress is very pretty. Oh, it's nothing. You look gorgeous. Thank you. Then the messages. These are signals that serve as stimuli for a receiver and must be sent and received. They may be auditory, visual, tactile, olfactory or smelling, gustatory, tasting, or any combination. You can create messages to talk about the world, people, and events, as well as to talk about other messages. These are called meta messages, and they represent a large number of our day to day utterances, such as, do you understand? What did you say? I want to be honest. Two particularly important types of messages are feedback and feed forward. Feedback. These are messages sent back to the speaker as reactions to what is said. Feedback can be categorized into four dimensions: positive, negative, immediate, delayed, low monitoring and high monitoring, and critical and supportive feedback. So you can read some of these points on positive, negative, immediate, delayed, low monitoring, high monitoring, and critical and supportive. So, how does positive and negative feedback benefit the speaker? Explain. Feed forward. This is the information you provide before sending your primary messages. Examples of feed forward include the preface or table of contents of a book, the opening paragraph of a chapter, movie, previews, magazine, email, introductions in public speeches, and so forth. A feed forward is a nice day, isn't it? Feed forward. Yes, it is sure. Is sure it is. Feedforward has four major functions. To open the channels of communication, it opens the communication. To preview the message, to disclaim, and to altcast the message. So these are the areas. Feedforward. So these are discussed here. You can read also in the textbook. The feedforward functions of feedforward. Then there is another one called the channel. Channel is the medium through which messages are passed. It acts as a bridge. So, examples of the channel: face to face interaction, you speak and listen, vocal auditory channel, but you also gesture and receive signal visually, gestural and visual channel, and you emit odors and smell those of others, chemical olfactory channel. Often you touch one another, and this touching also communicates. That is tactile channel, cutaneous tactile channel. So these are the channels of communication: gestures, postures, face to face, vocal, auditory, visual, and all kinds of channels. Channels also can be called in communication. There are face to face, telephone, electronic, traditional mail, film, fax, telegraph, all can be considered as channels. So, what are the channels? Please describe. So, in groups, describe a play or scenario which shows vocal, auditory, gestural, visual, chemical, olfactory, and cutaneous and tactile channels. Then, this is important, another area: noise. Noise enters into all communication systems, regardless how well designed, technically sophisticated. It is anything that distorts or interferes with message reception. It is present in a communication system to the extent that the message received differs from the message sent. There are three main types of noise: physical, psychological, and semantic. So, what is physical noise? Please describe. That interferes with the physical transmission of the message signal. Sunglasses, the screen of a passing car, the hum of a computer, and so forth. Psychological. Any form of psychological interference that can lead to distortions in the reception and processing of information. Examples: the bias, prejudices, close mindedness. Semantic noise occurs when the receiver listener does not decode the meaning intended by the speaker. It happens between people speaking different languages. Common examples include the use of jargon or technical and complex terms that not understood by your listener. And when the listener assigns meanings different from those you intend, ambiguous, highly emotional terms such as racist and sexist talk. So, all semantic noise. Then, another aspect is context. It is the environment in which the communication takes place. The context can be obvious or intrusive. It seems so natural that it is ignored at times the context. For example, the background music, and other times the context dominates and the way it restricts or stimulates our communication. Compare the differences in how we communicate at a funeral, a rock concert, and candlelight dinner, and in class. So these are the contexts. In which context you are talking. Also, so the context of communication has dimensions: physical dimension, temporal, socio psychological, and cultural contexts. All these things come into play. So these are the dimensions you can read in the textbook and underline the points: physical, temporal dimensions, and so forth. So noise is also a question for your written exam. So you have to study the separate parts and write down the points. For example, what is social psychological dimension of noise? Explain with points and examples. So, which dimension will a person be most likely to go out of context? Why? Just think about it. So, these are two questions for you to uh, discuss. Describe the role played by context in communication process. In order for communication to proceed, what should the speaker do to ensure continuity? State briefly the three types of noise and cite some examples. Try to answer, and this will also come for the exam. So, good luck with your learning in this section. So, thank you.